Last week I did a demo in Cursor using Grok 4.6, and it crossed my mind that I should do a demo on how I set up my workspaces in each of the apps that I use. So the common ones that I'm using right now are the Claude desktop app, the ChatGPT app, which is formerly the Codex app, and obviously Cursor. So there's a lot of variance out there in how people prefer to set up their workspaces, especially, depending on whether someone is doing coding versus regular knowledge work. So I figured it might be useful to just see how I set these up. I'm not saying that my method is the best by any means, but I think it's, at least for me, worked pretty well. So I'm here in the Claude desktop app. I'm inside of a project, so if you click on this tab on the left here, you can get to your projects. I've navigated into one, and I use a lot of Cowork. I think Cowork is really great. I use Claude Code occasionally as well too. But in terms of the simplicity of setting up a workspace, I really like what they've done with Claude Cowork. So I do a lot of my work from here, and I will set up a project for each client or each area of the business. And all I do is just create a new project, link it to a folder on my computer, and then I come here into this screen. So when you're in this screen, there's some instructions. There'll be some memories if you have any. If you don't have any saved, you won't see anything here, obviously. And then these are the folders that are linked for this specific project. So literally all I would do is I would just go in here into the instructions, and I have kind of a template that I use across all of my projects, and I'll talk through that in just a second, but I will paste the instructions in here. Well, if I have any typical memories that I would save for all of my clients, like preferences on how I communicate, anything like that, I'd just go to another project and tell it that I want it to export the memories so that I can copy and paste them in here. And that's what I would do to get this workspace set up with my memories. I'll also link a bunch of different folders. So I might have the main folder for the client, and then I might also link the downloads folder, and then I might link another folder or two depending on where some data is stored. So for me, I sync my Google Drive down to my local machine. So I'll actually sync the local client folder and the Google Drive folder that's synced to my computer alongside the downloads folder. So that's what I would typically do for my clients that I'm setting up as projects. And then in the instructions here, this is what I would use for pretty much every single client. So I say this project is, and then put the client name, and then I use Slack. So I have a Slack channel name. You might use a Teams channel or anything else that you're using for your internal communications. And then I say here, always check the project's memories/rules before working on new tasks. So this basically just tells it all those saved memories, go through them and make sure they're not applicable to what you're doing, or if they are, obviously apply them. These are obviously specific to how I run my business, but I would say use the Memorial Ridge Google account for email, calendar, and files. And then I tell it where the drive is. So there's a shared folder. I'm telling it that the shared folder is obviously client facing, so don't put anything in there that shouldn't be in there. And then I have this context.md, which I'm going to skip over for the purposes of this, but it basically is just a running thread of some of the tasks that Claude is helping me with, or whatever AI tool is helping me with. And then I tell it, here's where I have meeting transcripts. And then I tell it what connectors I often use. So I'll just list out the connectors. So I use Notion, Google Drive, Gmail, Google Calendar, Slack, and Granola most commonly. So that's all I do in these instructions. And that's pretty much, once I've done that, I'm pretty much done setting up my workspace. I would say it takes less than 5 minutes every single time, maybe 1 minute, especially if I have already grabbed the memories from one of my other projects. I'll just copy and paste a prompt in here, and it's just a list of all the different memories, and then it'll work through each of them and save each of them as individual memories. So that's how I would set up this client in Claude. So now I'm here in the ChatGPT app. I'm going to show basically the exact same thing here. So to set up that same type of client in ChatGPT, you'll see there's a little projects section here. There's going to be a plus icon. I can show you that in a second. If you hit the plus icon, a pop-up will come up, and I just click on local so that I can connect it to a local folder on my computer. So you can see I selected this one where my demo data sits. You can click add folder and add multiple, just like you can in Claude Cowork. So then you would put the name of the project here. So once I do that, I'll click create project, and it'll have it set up here as another folder. So this is what I was referring to a second ago. You click this plus, and then normally I'm just doing things locally. So Cloud could be useful, but if you're trying to work with files on your computer, you want to click local. So once I've done that, this is one of the main differences between Claude and all of the other applications right now. So Claude uses, if you're in Claude Cowork, it's just the instructions in the interface. It also uses a Claude.md file, which I won't talk about too much here. I've talked about it in the past a little bit. But what ChatGPT and Cursor both use is called an AGENTS.md file. It is essentially just the same instructions that I gave to Claude in the project. So what I would do here is I would just say create my agents.md file for this workspace, and then I would say put this in it, and I'll copy basically the exact same thing that I just had in Claude, and I'll just say this project is, I'll put the client name in there. I don't actually have a Slack channel for this, but I would say whatever the name of the Slack channel is, and then I'm pretty much putting the exact same thing as before. I'm just saying always check the project's memories and rules, and then same stuff as before. So technically in ChatGPT they're called plugins, but in my experience calling them connectors works just fine. So I would literally just send this, and it will start working on creating that agents.md file, and it will put it into this workspace. So, all right, so it created it, says exactly what I told it to say. So it's as simple as that. This workspace is good now. The other thing I would do, so ChatGPT can store memories as well. The same thing applies for Claude in ChatGPT. I would just go to another, if I have those memories in like another project, for example, I would just go to that project and say, can you please export all of the memories related to this project? It'll export them for me. I'll copy that and I'll just paste it here, and I'll just say something like, please save these as memories for this project. And then I'll paste it and it'll create the memories. So like some of these other folders that I have, there's memories saved to each of them. So it's as simple as that to set it up in ChatGPT as well. Also takes less than 5 minutes. All right, and lastly, I am here in Cursor, and pretty much the exact same process we did in ChatGPT is going to be applicable for Cursor. So what I would do is, if I didn't have a workspace, I would click this little icon here to add a folder, and then you'll just click on, they'll see, I don't want to show the pop-up because it'll show some stuff on my computer, but there'll be a pop-up and it just says use existing, and then you'll just link it to a folder on your computer. The one downside with Cursor right now, at least, I'm sure that they will update this soon, but right now you can only link it to one folder. You cannot link multiple folders like you can in Claude and ChatGPT. You'll link it to that folder, and then you'll say the same thing we just said. So I said create an agents.md for this workspace, put this in it, and then I am putting exactly the same thing, and then I would send this. It'll create an agents.md for me just like ChatGPT did, and the memories will be exactly the same in Cursor. They're actually called rules. So the rules will actually be mapped to your specific workspace just like they are in ChatGPT, just like they are in Claude Cowork, but they're called rules. So if you were to send something to Cursor, you could probably tell it to save a memory. I would suggest telling it to save a rule, and that's how you would get the same thing, and it'll apply that to the workspace every time you use it, just like it does in ChatGPT and in Claude. So we'll wait a second for this to finish. So I'm just going to say this to show a test, but I'll say, can you save a rule that says always end your messages with hell yeah? So once this is done with the agents.md, we'll see if we can save this rule to this workspace. All right, so finished with the agents.md. If I click this, you'll see it's the same thing that we got from ChatGPT. I'll close that and I'll just say, can you save a rule to this workspace? So it should be able to save this, and then I'll show you what it looks like in Cursor. You can actually see them for each of your workspaces. So if we go here to customize, and we go to this little section here called rules, you'll see there's some in my user account, but then there's one that's called sign off. This is the one it just created. If I click it, it'll pop open and it just says always end every message with hell yeah. So that's how you would get to the rules for your different workspaces. So if I send a message, it should hopefully apply the rule, and it does. So that's how you would save a rule to the workspace in Cursor, and that is pretty much it. This is like super simple, but I know sometimes it feels kind of daunting to set things up in a new system. It's actually super easy across each of them. It's a slightly different process, but each of them it's pretty quick to get up and running. So hopefully this was helpful, and if you like stuff like this, let me know. I'm happy to do more simple tutorials like this and kind of show people how I use these different tools at least. Thanks.